discussions where elders, herbalists, researchers, cultural practitioners, and audience members bring to the fore insights and lived experiences surrounding the use of bush tea and other herbal remedies for healing and wellness. This discussion is timely, considering the challenges posed by non-communicable and communicable diseases that plagues our society. This conversation is not just about sipping bush tea that was scrubbed or steeped in hot water, but is about knowledge plucked from experience, from gathering sweet brooms and bitter herbs to sacred healing spaces. Bush tea emphasizes the relationship and connection between body, spirit, and the land. Therefore, my task is to ensure a smooth conversation which highlights key themes while engaging in a dynamic and inclusive exchange of thoughts and ideas. I encourage participants to reflect, share stories, and ask questions so that by the end of our session, we will be edified and encouraged to preserve, practice, and embrace our ancestral knowledge and the tradition of bush tea as an important healing method. Bush tea is heritage and memory sipped from a curative cup. And, you know, I just want to say that as part of our traditional practices, but it's all about the healing arts. Bush tea is only one component. But, you know, in that cup is experience. In that cup of tea is memory. In that cup of tea is resilience. And, you know, traditional knowledge, which we aim to maintain and continue passing it on. We said a lot of our oral histories has been lost, but we are gathered here today as a symbol that there is still hope and there is still this aspect of our tradition is part of our cultural heritage. And now I will introduce the panel. And we position this session as an invigorating and edifying conversation linking the importance of ancestral knowledge, healing, wellness, traditional medical practice, and indigenous cultural heritage. I have to stress that point because it's very important for us to, you know, pass on the knowledge to generation. It's an ancestral practice that transcends generation and goes across borders, you know. On our panel today, and I invite the audience to engage actively throughout the reasoning session as well. So for the panelists, we have Mr. James Toussaint of Trinidad, we have Tracy Asen of Trinidad, we have Dr. Peggy Brunache, Jamaica/UK, we have Althia Brown, Guyana/US. We have Salassie Atadika, Ghana. And Dr. Christopher Roger Williams, Grenada. And to start us off, the first person from the panel that will speak to us today is Miss Althia Brown of Guyana. And her title, the title of her presentation is Openness and Protection of Ancestral Food Knowledge, which deals with protecting, safeguarding, and promoting safe use of traditional techniques and sacred practices while ensuring that cultural and economic benefits flow back to Caribbean people. And give you a short bio of Miss Althia Brown. She is a James Beard nominated storyteller, recipe developer, and self-taught chef. She is at the heart and hands behind metimg.com, an online platform where she shares the flavor, history, and culture of Guyana through food. She is also the author of the best-selling cookbook Caribbean Paleo, which explores Caribbean cuisine through a paleo lens. Her recipes are grounded in history, tradition, and stories from her childhood. Althia focuses primarily on traditional Guyanese dishes, along with gluten, grain, and dairy-free adaptations. She is passionate about using traditional Caribbean ingredients in innovative ways to connect with the diaspora and food lovers around the world. Born and raised in Georgetown, Guyana, Althia now lives in Aurora, Colorado, with her husband and 3 children. Her work has been featured on Food Network, Serve Family Style, in the New York Times, Forbes, Travel, Ledger, BuzzFeed, Tasty, and First We Feast, amongst others. She also hosts an immersive Caribbean dining experience, teaches hands-on cooking classes, and shares food stories and traditions on social media. And now, Miss Althia, you know the audience is waiting.
Thank you. So we live in an age where a single social media post can lead to a viral trend. I'm sure you've all seen it. You share a story about your grandmother soaking sea moss. You talk about these traditions and how they've been a part of your family for generations. You share some of the things that your grandmother told you, some of the knowledge of how she used sea moss to heal her body. And before you know it, this clip goes viral and people are captivated. Sorry, there's a video. So I want you to experience what it's like to go on TikTok and you see this video of someone's grandmother making sea moss, and then we'll talk a little bit about it. It's catching up.
It just set for 24 hours. My mother taught me about sea moss. This is how it is made. Allow it to set for 24 hours. Cover it up. Is that pretty? Put the aloe vera in so it will gel. Becoming white long time. This is sea moss.
So what happens next? Sea moss becomes viral, it becomes a superfood, it's labeled as a superfood, and it goes on to be a multi-billion-dollar health trend. People start adding it to smoothies, they start talking about all the minerals and nutrients it has, things your grandmother knew without actually having the science to back it up. And then it starts showing up in mainstream smoothies and drinks, but who benefits from that, and what does that look like? Listen to this next clip.
I got it, let's try it, and rated 1 through 10. This smoothie by itself was $19. It was $19. It was $19 before taxes, so it's probably like $21 after tax. The customer service, this is my 3rd time coming to Airwine, and the customer service is always really good. It's a lot of people in there. When I say a lot of people, it's packed. Somebody got some money. The money in here with us somewhere. It's in here somewhere. I would say I'm gonna show you everything I got, but this is all I got. I'm gonna be reading off the menu because there's a lot of ingredients. The official name for this is Haley Beaver Strawberry Glaze Skin Smoothie. This contains malt almond milk, Zuma Valley coconut cream, dates, vital proteins, vanilla collagen, Maple Valley maple syrup, banana, Airwine sea moss, hyaluronic acid, Driscoll strawberries. They got a specific strawberry in here. Vanilla stevia and Driscoll's organic strawberry glaze. The ingredients kind of justify the price because that's a lot of ingredients and a lot of high quality ingredients at that. But $19 is still a little jarring, to say the least. I think a lot of the allure is the aesthetics. It's a good smoothie. Because of the amount of ingredients that's in here and amount of health benefits you get from the smoothie that's in here, sea moss, that alone.
And they're marketing it as a gut healing, collagen rich. It will do all the things you ever want anything to do. And this jar of sea moss gel is $89. So I want you to think about that for a little. And then I want you to think about breadfruit. Think about breadfruit and all the ways that we use breadfruit in the Caribbean, and now breadfruit is also labeled as a superfood. And
Breadfruit has been in the Caribbean
we already
for quite some time, since 1793. It is not a native species to our part of the world, but it is a very tropical crop, and it does very, very well here. What is beautiful about it is that this tree, one tree, can produce during the course of a year well over 200 or 300 fruits.
Wow.
And when you look at our yellow breadfruit, which is the type that is most common here, a yellow breadfruit can be anywhere between 4 to 5 pounds. You realize that one fruit can be just cooked to provide a meal, quite a filling meal for the family. So breadfruit does have a very important role to play in the diet, not just because it creates a food that is basically like a kind of belly fill. It's quite
filling. Yeah, it is indeed.
But that particular characteristic to give you a sense of satiation, all right, or satiety, is because it has a special type of carbohydrate.
Okay.
Breadfruit is regarded as a crop provincial because it's a starchy food, locally grown, and the history of our root crops and crops like breadfruit is that they were first and foremost primarily grown on the provision grounds of enslaved Africans. So we're here. What is so special about the carbohydrate, the type of carbohydrate in breadfruit and the root crops as well, is that it's a type of carbohydrate that is complex, which means that it is not as readily metabolized or burnt up for energy by the body. And because it tends to stay in the digestive system long because of the high fiber content, right? The high fiber content, it gives that sense of satiation. It's high in potassium, which is very good. If you have health challenges like hypertension, where you would want to avoid the sodium, but you must maintain the electrolyte balance and so in your body. So potassium is what is normally recommended as a substitute. Breadfruit is high.
So the nutrition science is telling us what our ancestors already knew.
So this is pretty much the most interesting fruit I've ever tasted. This is called breadfruit, and today we're roasting them the traditional way. Breadfruit is a tropical tree that flowers every 90 days. One tree can produce 200 breadfruit a year. The skin is leathery and can withstand an extremely hot fire. Once it's completely charred and begins to look like dragon eggs, as they like to say, they're ready to eat.
Oh, wow. That is super interesting.
It's now time to cut it open and remove the heart, somewhat like an artichoke.
Look how soft that is. Holy.
It literally tastes and feels like bread that has just come out of a hot oven. The classic glaze with melted butter. You need to try this now.
How does that make you feel? You need to try this now. Telling the world something that we've been eating for generations is now the superfood, and you need to try it now. And the thing is, breadfruit has this viral moment, just like sea moss is having a viral moment. And who benefits and profits from that? And how do we get some of that profit to circle back to the Caribbean? So it really begs the question, should we keep sharing ancestral food knowledge openly? Or do we need to protect it to prevent exploitation and rising costs?
Is the soul of Guyanese pepper pot. Not just because it lends it its signature color and taste, but also because it comes from the heart and hands of Guyana's first people. Bitter cassava is scraped and grated, then stuffed into a matapi, a cylindrical basket made from the fibers of the ite palm. By leaning their weight on a stick, the villagers stretch the matapi, wringing out every drop of starchy juice into a basin below, then into a large karahi perched over a wood-burning fire. Slowly, the cloudy liquid transforms, its toxic cyanide evaporating in the heat. At this stage, we have cassava water, and it is shared among neighbors to make tuma, an indigenous brothy soup that's everyday comfort food. Once cooled and strained, the liquid returns to the fire for a long, patient boil. It darkens from tan to mahogany to the deep, almost black syrup we cherish. The flavor is intense, earthy cassava with a whisper of bitterness. Villagers describe it as sweet. Children scrape the pot clean, spooning the glossy sauce like candy. That single ingredient, born of communal effort, is what makes Guyanese pepper pot unforgettable.
That's me. That's my content. I'm sharing the same way, hoping to have a viral moment, but really honoring where the food came from, honoring my ancestors, sharing the knowledge, but also still guarding it. I don't actually go through step by step how that process is. It's an indigenous process, and I do believe that it should be guarded and it should be protected. Because like breadfruit and sea moss, CASRIP is also having a viral global moment. And the result of that is the needing to commodify CASRIP and to have it be available in the US and in the diaspora for easy purchasing and consumption. What that means is that, as you can see, that is a labor-intensive process with small yield. So we spend an entire day grading about 40 pounds of cassava to get one little bottle of CASRIP. In order to make that a viable market commodity, they have to dilute it. So you end up having CASRIP on the market that's like 10% actual CASRIP and 90% burnt sugar and other additives. And who benefits from that? Big industries, certainly not the little indigenous groups that are grating the cassava or farming the cassava and going through that process. So again, what do we need to do to ensure that we have cultural sovereignty? Openness matters. Sharing matters. As someone with a very vibrant social media platform, I do believe that sharing is important. It matters because we get to tell our own stories. We get to shape the narrative. We decrease the gap between our ancestral knowledge and our own knowledge. And that gap is widening. Grandmothers are no longer sharing recipes. Women are, and children are no longer in the kitchen cooking. And that gap is widening. So there is a need for us to continue to share, but how we share also matters. When we share our food with global audiences, we don't just build visibility, we build pride. And when Caribbean knowledge is recognized, valued, and celebrated, our ancestors' legacies become part of the world's collective memory rather than just a footnote. So we become dominant in the conversation. And think about sea moss again. Sea moss is out there, it's trending. There is no acknowledgement to where the sea moss is coming from, the communities that are actually gathering and producing sea moss and exporting it. So we want to make sure that we are sharing that knowledge, we are connecting it back, and we do have a fingerprint in it and not necessarily just a footnote.
Yeah,
but protection is equally important. We must safeguard traditional techniques and sacred practices from misuse and distortion. We must ensure that when people engage with our food, they do so with accuracy and with respect. And with cultural context. Remember the guy on the beach looking at the roasted breadfruit like he'd never seen anything like it in his life? When we interact with people and we have these experiences, we also have to make sure that we're sharing in the correct way what the method is, what the process is, how it's used, and honoring those that came before.
Yeah, wrap up.
We must demand that economic benefits flow not just to global industry, but also back to Caribbean people, to our small farmers, our harvesters, our cooks, and yes, even our storytellers. Because without protection, our foods risk becoming commodified, stripped of meaning, overpriced, and then abandoned when the trend cycle moves on. If you live outside of the Caribbean, you know how hard it is to find reasonable oxtail. But with balance, with openness, and protection working together, our foods remain what they have always been, living expressions of our heritage, nourishing our bodies, sustaining our communities, and telling our stories for generations to come. Balance is not just strategy, it is survival, it is justice, and it's how we ensure that Caribbean food remains that the Caribbean remains not only the origin of these foods, but also the heart of their future. We have to protect our food, we have to keep sharing, and we have to find a balance somewhere in the middle.
Yes, thank you so much. Wonderful. Thank you, Ms. Althia Brown, for that interesting presentation, looking at some of our foods, the sea moss, breadfruit, the cassava, and the importance for us to, value these things and know that others are making billions from our heritage products. Yeah, so we will get into it as we go further. So now we will bring our second presenter, Dr. Peggy Brunache. The title of her presentation is talking about slave cuisine in terms of reconceptualization of slave diet to slave cuisine as culinary resistance. We interpret Black women's contribution to Caribbean culture, learn about slavery, and feel pride without re-traumatizing. And to give a short bio on Dr. Peggy Brunache, she's a lecturer in public history and archaeology at the University of Glasgow and served as the founding director of Beniba Centre for Slavery Studies, Scotland's first for supporting and sharing research on slavery, legacies, and leading international and national reparative justice initiatives. As a historical archaeologist, she has excavated sites in West Africa, Caribbean, and the United States. Many of her public-facing projects include designing massive open online courses and working with theaters, science, and cultural festivals. Her international media appearances include Discovery Science Channel and documentaries in the US and Germany. And now, ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Peggy Brunache.
Thank you so much. Can everyone hear me with this? Yes? Thank you. I'm supposed to be able to click. There we go. So I take it by a show of hands, everyone has heard of slave diet? Show of hands. Any have heard the term slave cuisine? Yeah. Whenever people talk about the history of what the enslaved Africans and descendants ate, it's always couched in the term of diet. And I would always use the term cuisine and always have someone white say, no, I'm sorry, Dr. Brunache, you must mean diet because, and I say because, and force them to say only white people could have cuisine. So then I have to take them through an entire lesson to demonstrate how that is certainly not the case. And I start with helping people to understand, well, what is it? What is it that we eat now in the Caribbean, and what was it connected to during slavery? And so I use elements of archival research as well as what I've excavated, like this particular article from the French Caribbean that specifically said, if you're going to have enslaved people, you must feed them this amount of saltfish or barreled beef and a certain amount of cassava flour or manioc. In all my research, I have never come across any document that said, if you're going to have beasts of burden, if you're going to have oxen, mules, horses, you must feed them. But yet I've constantly found throughout the Caribbean that they had to create laws to tell people to feed enslaved Africans, which I think is telling. So I guess this isn't working. Could I have the next slide, please? Thank you. So much of understanding what it is that it was part of what was then the slave diet is this misconception that enslaved people were eating the scraps off of the master's table. There is no way that any plantation that had 100, 200, 300 people were being fed the scraps off of one white slaving family. Please go forward. So these laws that were created to make sure that they would be worked to death but still able to eat included all these complex carbohydrates, much like the video that was shown when Althia was talking, like the manioc, the yams, the sweet potatoes, guinea corn. Next slide, please. Next slide. Oh, it'll work now? And of course, so many of the types of food practices were inherited from the original Amerindians, the indigenous people of the Caribbean, particularly that of cassava, manioc, and flour that's made, the different syrups that were that was just discussed. But of course, there had to be, alongside the carbohydrates, a certain amount of protein. And if it was going to be animal protein and not plant protein like peas and beans, it was going to be salt fish and salted beef. Fresh beef could only be for white people, which means you could kill an enslaved person for touching fresh beef. I quickly came to understand that, just as it was then, as it is now, the idea of what slave foodways was about was what I would say is a racialized culinary value, meaning, oh, those poor people, they had so little to eat. What they ate was just these scraps. It wasn't that great. It was just, a bit of salted this and that and just a lot of carbohydrates, right? Yet another way to fix this racist idea of value on what it is we eat. What it is that we eat, what we ate and eat now, had a lot to do with foods that were moving from various parts of the world, what we call the Columbia Exchange. And you may see, if you Google, you'll see images like this, foods coming from Asia, from Africa, some from Europe, coming to the Americas, and vice versa. What they never include in those pictures are the millions of our ancestors that also were part of this exchange. But if we're talking about food, right, this only helps to understand there was never just a diet. It was never just a question of some cassava flour and some salt fish. That it was far more than that. That the culinary diversity of today was in existence in the past, drawing from Amerindian as well as African and European, and after slavery ended, the Indian continent, but certainly as well as other sources from all these people that were mixing forcibly as well as voluntarily, that came to be part of what we consider cuisine then and now. And not just what was forced upon them, but what was actively grown by our ancestors in their kitchen gardens, often next to the slave huts that they had. And we're talking the various kinds of fruit that wasn't just about sweetness, but it was also about diversity of texture and taste and color and different kinds of vitamins, the kinds of vegetables that we could include, that we needed for nutrients as well as for taste and flavor. All these different kinds that we could have a little bit of a starchy flavor, but still not be as complex as the yams. Althia was talking about breadfruit. And as breadfruit is now being capitalized as the superfood, it was for centuries only seen as slave food. White people would never eat that. That is slave food. That we are better than that, a white person would think. But also understanding that breadfruit is also as endemic as it is to Caribbean foodways. It only came here in the late 1700s. So some of you who have ancestry, particularly in Barbados, that goes back to the 1600s, they weren't eating breadfruit. That didn't show up until the end of the 18th century as more slave food, for all the reasons that Althia's video showed. But for us, it was never just about sustaining life. It had to be about sustaining life, about healing, but also about providing flavor and taste in our food, And that never gets discussed when you see any of these old archival writings about the slave diet, the kinds of heat that we prefer. Sometimes we want it really hot, sometimes not so hot, depending on what you're feeling that day. The kinds of ingredients that gave us color, that changes something from a soup to a stew in terms of thickness. And of course, the provision grounds where we grew far more of the starchy, complex carbohydrates that we needed to sustain those arduous days of working 14 hours in the field. But foods that weren't just grown underground, where we also used a lot of the leaves to make our kalalus and other dishes, right? And again, all of these had different textures and tastes and flavors that we know to use when we want to have a certain kind of experience. Going back to protein, something that enslaved people were ready to riot over if they didn't get it. Again, fresh meat was often not provided, often not legal. So it was often, as I said, and as you already know, salt fish. Fresh fish was not often available because, well, one, who's going to do the fishing when everybody's supposed to be in the field processing, cutting, and cultivating sugarcane? What instead most people were eating were other forms of fresh, well, actually shellfish. Why? Because you didn't have to have a skill. Even if most people were working in the fields, you could send the children or old people to the coastline to collect it. And again, that constantly would change the flavor and the taste and the consistency of your foods. We all know about lumbi, about conch, which is probably the largest shellfish. But oftentimes, what I found archaeologically were these smaller kinds, West Indian top shell. That's what everybody ate all the time. And again, sometimes you'd want to add a bit of conch instead of top shell, or a bit of something else. And again, depending on your preference, your taste, what you wanted, adds to the idea and understanding of cuisine. And then, of course, this only expands once indentured laborers coming out of South Asia, bringing curry powders and other recipes that, again, that we love, like roti. So this is why I had to reconsider the idea of slave diet, not as something restricting and minimal, that foodways, black foodways, slave foodways, was resistance. Not just in terms of surviving, because often what was supposed to be provided was not. Therefore, we had to make sure that we got what we needed. And it's also an aspect of identity, which I'll come to in a minute. The idea of food as resistance is probably a new concept for a lot of people, because often when we think of resistance, we think of open rebellion, the armed combat, and often a very male-centric kind of concept. But if they were working people to death, if they weren't even feeding people, then the fact that enslaved Africans and their descendants were doing whatever they needed to do to not only put food in their bellies, but to make sure that it was going to taste good, that would bring them joy, that would bond their family, then I just see it as we have to reconceptualize it as slave cuisine. That this is an aspect of slavery that we can talk about and feel pride. That we choose to still eat a lot of this food when we don't have to. And when it comes to identity, probably the easiest way to understand it is, we all know the saying, you are what you eat. Well, if you are what you eat, then who makes what you eat says a lot about who you are. And that means these enslaved women were at the heart of what we would eventually consider ourselves as Bajan, as Haitian, as Jamaican, as Creole in the Caribbean. That they weren't just feeding us as a family, us as a community, but the fact that the food that they were selling from their own kitchen gardens was actually feeding everyone all over the island, including white slavers, when they couldn't get their shipments from the UK or elsewhere. That it was black women that are not properly centered as part of why we are who we are now.
You gotta wrap up.
As I'm wrapping up, it is just another way to help us remember that so much of these traditions that you could even see visually have not changed that much, but that the food that we choose to eat now, we do because it tastes good. It tastes good now, it tastes good then. And that we should never think of what happened before as just slave diet. It was culinary resistance. It was love. It was joy in a time of slavery. And to also show you the extent of how we should be considering our food, our dishes, I show you this example of soup joumou, which is what we call our freedom soup. It's a soup from Haiti, which I am of Haitian descent. And these pictures are of I cook this, all of this is, I cut it, I made it. And soup joumou is recognized by UNESCO as a tangible cultural heritage, right? This was one of the first dishes that has been, that unites the country, that was made when we were never allowed to have it. The folklore is only whites were allowed to have the soup, that enslaved people weren't. And after the Haitian Revolution ended and we declared our freedom, that on January 1st, this is the soup we eat. This is our freedom soup, because it is the food that black people have been making when we weren't allowed to eat it, but now we eat it, we celebrate it, we honor our ancestors, as we should all do, and feel pride about something that came out of the past as we honor our ancestors today. Thank you.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. Wonderful, huh? Culinary resistance, slave cuisine, you know, soup joumou, right, as all part of our cultural heritage. And that's what I was trying to reinforce, you know, our intangible cultural heritage. And we know in the Caribbean, each island, you know, celebrate with food. You know, Bajan is cocoa and flying fish, and St. Vincent is roast breadfruit. So, you know, across the Caribbean, Grenada is the all down and thing, you know. Yeah, so food play a very important role within the scheme of things. And now we will have our third panelist, Salassie Atadika. And the title of her presentation is Community Medicinal Memory Wall, where is a kind of group interactive mapping of ingredients where participants are encouraged to share childhood memories of herbal remedies and bush teas. Together, a collective medicinal memory wall will be built by mapping plants and their uses, highlighting overlaps between African and Caribbean traditions. Chef, food systems change maker, and founder of Midunu, Salassie Atadika is a Time Earth Award-winning chef and global thought leader at the intersection of food, climate resilience, and economic justice, proving that the most sustainable solutions are almost the most flavorful. A finalist for the Bass Culinary World Prize, she has been named among the best chefs award top 100 chefs in the world, and honored with a La Liste New Destination Champion Award. Her work has been featured in BBC, CNN, the Financial Times, and the New York Times, earning international acclaim for revolutionizing African food systems through sustainability, storytelling, and ethical sourcing. For Atadika, food is identity, memory, politics, and power. a connection shaped by her journey from relocating to the U.S. after the 1981 coup in Ghana to working in humanitarian crises across the world. This experience fueled her beliefs that food is not just sustenance, but a tool for restoring dignity, fostering resilience, and creating opportunities for sustainable peace. A former humanitarian aid worker with the United Nations, Atadika applies a system-level approach to food security and climate action. She champions plant-forward diets, regenerative agriculture, and circular food economies, advocating for neglected and underutilized species and indigenous knowledge as an essential solution to climate resilience. A sought-after speaker and Macmillan Fellow at Yale University, she has addressed audiences at global sustainability forums, making the case for African foodway as a cornerstone of climate-resilient food systems. She believes in the power of deliciousness to drive food system change, proving that sustainability, cultural preservation, and indulgence are not only compatible, but essential for the future of food. Ladies and gentlemen, Ms. Salassie.
Thank you. Can you hear me? No. Okay, there we are. Good afternoon, everybody. I will switch to sort of a conversation, and I'm going to ask you guys to help me. I moved back to Ghana 11 years ago after working for many years around the continent. But when I was a child, my mom used to come up with all sorts of concoctions whenever we were sick. And one of her favorites, which I used to hate as a child, but now whenever I start having a little bit of a sore throat, is the first thing I do is mixing garlic and ginger. I know that you guys have your own concoctions from home and from your families, and I'd love for us to talk about them. But I moved back to Ghana, and I started seeing and hearing a lot of different mixes that people were using. One of the ones that I realized in Ghana was that whenever women had just given birth, people gave them a leaf called bitter leaf. Bitter leaf is a bitter leaf, but one of the things about it is it was extremely high in iron. I also found out for myself, I had fibroids and I was always anemic, etc. And people kept telling me, have turkey berry, turkey berry, turkey berry. Turns out turkey berry is extremely high in iron. There are other foods. One of my aunties has a high, she's diabetic. And so every morning, she's now in her, I think she's about 90, she's turning 90 this year. Whenever I go over there for her morning, she has a cup of tea with a piece of precasse. If you take a look at the photo, there's this brown pod in the photo. That's precasse. It's a pod from a tree. It looks a little bit like carob, but it's not. And it's known for helping with blood sugar. So she pours hot water on it, lets it sit there while she finishes her breakfast, and by the time she's finished, it's cooled down enough, and she drinks it. And I asked her what it was for. She said it's for blood sugar. The other one that she uses is what we call in Ghana sobolo. Sobolo is the same as sorrel. And so if you're not putting the sugar in it, the sorrel drink is really good for blood sugar as well. So during COVID, I started trying to understand more about all of these things. And then I realized during COVID that in Ghana, what people were using whenever they did get COVID was neem. And I've seen a lot of neem trees around here. And they take the branches, they boil water, they pour it over, and they would do inhalation using the neem. And also realized that there was another plant called scent leaf, which is a West African tree basil. In Ghana, we call it num-num. And num-num is used for respiratory illnesses. So that was also something that I found that people were using during COVID. Other ones that I saw being used was, or not used enough actually, was baobab. The tree has this powder that comes from the pod. And it turns out that 1 tablespoon of baobab is your daily requirement of vitamin C. Now, imagine in a community or in populations where you don't have money to go to a pharmacy to buy the vitamin C, or in the case of even COVID, where vitamin C was no longer on the shelves because everybody was consuming it. What if everyone just went to the local market, bought baobab, and mixed it and had their baobab drink in the morning as their source of vitamin C? It changes the economics completely, but also it's natural medicine. So what I wanted to do with you guys today is do a mapping of that. A lot of these ingredients are not only from one location or another. They've crossed the ocean. And I would like for you guys to think, what are some of the remedies, what are the bush teas, what are the ingredients, the foods that you were given as a child when you had an illness or just for general wellness? Who made it for you? And what did they say it was for? And I would also love to start seeing how we cluster, because as we know, it's not just wives' tales, if we can say it that way, but they all have scientific backing that maybe we have or have not tested. So I'm just going to give you guys a couple of moments to start thinking about these teas or ingredients. And I'm going to go ahead and start writing them down. I'm hoping that we have some volunteers. Anybody ready to volunteer some ideas or memories that they're coming back with? Yes? Anybody? Castor oil. Castor oil? And what was castor oil used for?
Everything, constipation. So you drank it for constipation.
So constipation?
You would put it on an almond leaf for headaches.
Headaches? Anybody else have any other uses for castor oil before we move on? For castor oil. Okay. Anybody else on castor oil, or we're moving to another ingredient? Yes? Mm-hmm. Okay, thank you. Is that also on castor oil, or? Yes. On your feet? So you massage your legs with it and feet with it to bring down swelling? Okay. Anybody else on castor oil? Yes. Hair? Hair growth?
Look at your chart, girl.
Thank you. Great. Anybody else on castor oil before we move? Okay, great. So other ingredients? Yes. Senna, S-E-N-N-A. I have some growing in my garden right now, actually. What do you use it for? Laxative? Any other uses for senna? And the interesting thing is a lot of these herbs I've discovered are bitter. And it's an interesting way for the plants to protect themselves, because if something is bitter, things won't go for it. So it actually stays powerful. Any other? Yes. Senna would be given before school starts.
As a flush out from the summer.
Okay. Oh, before school, like before the school year?
Before the school year starts.
Okay.
It's our tradition. Granny would give us senna to drink before school starts.
Thank you. Are you still practicing that in any way? No.
So to add to that, in Trinidad, we call it, you're taking a purge. So when you take, you say, well, I grew up knowing it be senna and salt.
Senna
so
and
you
salt.
take it as a purge.
With salt. Excellent. Did you have a, no? Anybody else? Any other ingredients? Wow, okay. Right here. Soursop leaves for what? Okay, soursop leaves to help as a sleep aid. Okay. Yes. For soursop? Soursop leaves for fever, to help to bring out the fever. Anybody else on soursop? Yes? Soursop leaves to help with blood pressure. Okay, great. Yes? Okay, so soursop leaves to... Soursop heart, yes? To stop from bedwetting. Excellent. And the thing is, actually, for me, I think whenever you start getting clusters of people saying the same thing, we understand that there's probably some truth in there. I had a really interesting experience a few years ago at Harvard University. They had a class called Food and Science, and they asked me to speak about something, and I went with a bunch of ingredients actually, that I had heard stories about that I believed did X, Y, and Z. And they had a PhD student who ended up helping me, and we put it in a microscope, and everything my mother and grandmothers had said was true. So the question is how much time are we putting into substantiating a lot of this knowledge? We have in Ghana a center for indigenous medicine, and they actually get the leaves, they turn it into powders, and so you can actually go there, you tell them what is wrong with you, and then they are like, well, this is traditionally what we would use. So are we doing more of that? Are we doing enough of that? Are we sharing that information amongst ourselves so that we're protecting this? Any other ingredients? Yes, sir. Banana leaves, for what? Drawing out fever for banana leaves. Anybody else? Okay, yes, absolutely. The leaves or the fruit? For cooling down, okay. Okay. And then the banana leaves? For fever, yes.
Another one, cactus, what we call spongineal here.
Okay.
Cactus, we used to put it when my mother has pain in the back.
Okay, back pain? And that's the gel from inside the cactus?
The gel, yeah, she would just cut it in half.
Okay.
But it works, because right now my knee was hurting.
Yes.
And swollen.
Yeah.
I putting it on, and I'm drinking it. The knee has gone down, and
yeah.
the pain has gone.
Yeah. Cactus. Fantastic. Mm-hmm. Anybody else? Yes. This one.
As Wonder World leaf.
Wonder World leaf. Wonder World leaf.
Yes. Mm-hmm. And I remember my mom would give me that if I had a cold. And I went to a herbalist once, and he actually said to me that if I can use 3 of those leaves a week, that it strengthens your immune system.
Fantastic. Wonder
World or Cure for All leaf?
Wonder World leaf. All cure? Cure for all leaf.
Turmeric.
Okay, for?
To alleviate blood clot.
Okay.
And sometimes washout too.
Okay. And I know it as an anti-inflammatory. And usually you have to mix it with a little bit of black pepper and a little bit of oil, because that's what activates, I think, some of the properties inside there. So when you look at Ayurvedic cooking, if you look at Indian cooking, there's always black pepper, turmeric, and usually it's coconut milk for the fat. So all those things, we need to start understanding what they do with the chemistry of these ingredients.
So actually your mix is opposite. So what I grew up with for the saffron, as we call it, in Trinidad, where like my grandmother or my aunts would mix it into something, and I'm from East Indian descent, would mix it into a drink they call karha, which is sweetened actually. So you use ginger and the saffron, you use a little condensed milk. So in the event of a fall or an accident or something, it is to help remove any of the clots. And even during women and their menstrual cycle, it's good. But even so, it's used because I know you want to tell a story, but even in Hindu wedding ceremonies, because of the purifying methods of saffron, it's grated, it's grated and patched and then mixed with some mustard oil. And the bride and groom for 3 days rub down with that paste, and then they don't shower during that period, and then they really bathe with milk on the morning of the wedding to get that off, and there is a glow like no other out of that saffron. It's the result of it. And even with pains, I remember my dad having a pinched nerve, and we patched the raw saffron and put it on the pinched nerve spot, and it is supposed to assist.
And just to clarify, it's the saffron is the turmeric?
Yeah, the saffron, but the raw root.
Yes.
Because, you know, you grow it in your backyard or
Yeah.
whatever the case is.
Perfect.
And then you just grate it.
Thank you.
You talked about the neem, though, before, and
Yeah.
we as well, our contingent, we saw them growing so large, the trees, you know. And I was telling my team that growing up as a child, if you got chicken pox or measles, they would make a bed of the neem leaves, like put it in a pillowcase, and you would sleep on that, and it's supposed to help. And because, again, in Hinduism, we use it as part of our religious offerings. You know, it's a revered tree. So that was just to add to what you said.
Thank you. Anybody else with other ingredients or more on the turmeric or others? Yeah. Okay, that one I don't know actually.
Salassie.
Okay, do you know how to spell it?
Cerasee.
Okay.
Riley.
Okay.
Or bitter melon.
Okay, bitter melon, yes. It's like a cucumber looking with, yes.
Prickly looking.
And what is it used for?
I think it cleans out the blood.
I know it for I know it for blood sugar, to lower blood sugar.
Miss Brown doesn't like Riley.
Yes, sir. Papaya leaf, yeah.
Like when you have kidney stuff or dengue.
Dengue fever for
not during the fever, like when it first onset.
Early onset.
Yeah.
Okay. So a lot of them I find are good for when things are at the beginning or while you're doing other treatments. So for example, we use a lot of lemongrass or citronella for malaria, for example. Like you're still taking your other medicine, but like it's just you're drinking lots and lots of lemongrass tea. But the lemongrass also keeps away mosquitoes. It also keeps away snakes. Like so we have it growing in our gardens for lots of different reasons.
Yeah, wrap up.
Clove.
Cloves?
Cloves, yes. Painkiller.
Okay. Mm-hmm. Excellent, thank you. So I think for me, the idea is that we have a lot of this knowledge. How are we going to find ways to harness that information? How are we going to find ways to formalize it? I think for a lot of, I would say from what I've seen, there's a lot of brainwashing of us to feel as if what we know it may or may not be true. And we start to question ourselves. Just as a quick story, there's a plant that's growing in Ghana on this farm, and I was asking this guy about it, and he said, yes, there's a pharmaceutical company that comes and buys it, and you know what they do? They get the molecular structure. So in food science, you burn something, and you can get the molecular structure in a lab, and then they create the synthetic of it. That's what's happening, and we're actually now buying the medicine back for the pharmaceutical company that's taking our plants out of our gardens for free. So I think it's important for us to really remember the knowledge. All of us have different stories about different uses of these medicines. For us to recognize the connection across the oceans and beyond. Even today, we've been talking about the Hindu, we've been talking about Ayurvedic. All of these things are connecting. Where is this knowledge coming from? How do we connect it? How do we reclaim it? How do we write it down? How do we repurpose it and reimagine it? So thank you very much. And I think the point is we are part of this knowledge, and it's for us to start documenting it, writing it down, sharing it, and using it again.
Wonderful, wonderful, wonderful. See how she jogged your memory. Remember he said in that cup of tea is memory, resilience, and all that. And it's very interesting for parents. You know, we are standing on the foundation and we are kind of carrying on the baton. Even in the age of pharmaceutical medicine and biomedical practices, Caribbean people still love their bush medicine. Yeah? From the Cersei bush to the wonder of the world, to the banana and the plantain leaf, And we going down the road now, cure for all. So many, turmeric, ginger, so many. But I know we cutting for time, so I know this discussion, especially this segment with mapping, could have gone for another hour, because there's a lot more herbs that being used, and the castor oil and thing, you know. Who remember as a child getting to the elders say, come and drink this bush tea before you go to school? Almost every weekend you got to do a purge, right? Whether it's Epsom salts in the tea, castor oil, a little shark oil, some Cersei bush, I know in Barbados, St. Vincent, you got to drink that Cersei, man, and that bohe bush, bitter like gall. Yeah, but they say it's good for you. Look, they live long. Barbados have a whole centenarian population, people living in the 90s and 80s and thing, you know, and that come from somewhere. So even though we like macaroni pie and fried chicks and chicken and thing, remember to go and pick bush and drink some bush tea, but make sure you know the herbs they're using, yeah? So we're moving on. And now our fourth panel would be Dr. Christopher Roger Williams of Grenada. And the title of his presentation is Mental Peace, Healing the Nation Through Drama, Memory, and the Inner Map, a powerful storytelling journey that frames therapeutic healing as a modern application of our ancestral Caribbean oral tradition, a testament to Caribbean resilience and the pursuit of holistic wellness by using stories to build both personal and collective well-being. And Dr. Christopher Roger Williams is a cultural entrepreneur, certified recreational therapist, drama education specialist, and award-winning performing arts educator, a musician, actor, playwright, storyteller, and published author from Grenada, an honors and distinction student at all levels. Dr. Williams holds a Bachelor of Arts degree with honors in drama, in education, where he graduated as a valedictorian, a Master of Business Administration, and a Doctorate in Business Administration, focused on arts-based wellness innovation. Dr. Williams is the founder of Mental Peace, Inc. and Mental Peace Consultancy, therapeutic net frameworks, combining process, drama, and business psychology to address trauma, mental health, and community resilience in the Caribbean. As founder and director of the C.R. Williams Performing Arts Academy, he holds training in drama and digital interactive media education at the post-secondary level. He also serves as curriculum development officer for creative and performing arts in Grenada's Ministry of Education. His work bridges performance, therapy, and education to foster individual and collective transformation throughout the Caribbean. His thesis, Mental Peace, a therapeutic action plan for the treatment of victims, survivors, and perpetrators of gender-based violence in Grenada. Ladies and gentlemen, Dr. Williams.
Okay, check. Hello, everyone. Good. Thank you so much. I don't know where she found all that information, but that's good news. So I'm glad that you found out that about me. But I'm hearing a lot of talk about the tea and the food. But I shouldn't tell you this, I shouldn't say this. But before I got into this, my father was one of the first bush doctors in Grenada. That's the best kept secret. And I heard him, a lot of persons visited him, and you didn't mention that part here, when the below couldn't get up. So a lot of men visited when the below couldn't get up. And so as a little boy in the room listening to him tell them what to take and what to drink and that remedy, and then him sending us to the bush to get the bush, to bring that back, we always wondered what that served, what purpose that served. But they came back after and they say, leader, because he was an archbishop as well, leader, the thing fall out in the basin, plow. And so he gave them things to pass out things. I say no more. But, so, that was his job, and so he went around healing people, helping persons, using the herbs as medicine. But I find myself today doing it in a similar way, using drama as medicine, drama as therapy. this has audio, if you could send the audio. And why I'm doing this is because my journey took me to a place where I realized that the most critical element is human resource. Yeah? And if you don't liberate yourself or emancipate yourself, you could eat as much as you want. You could eat all kind of food you want, and still your mind could be in a different place. You could turn it up, you know, your system works, right? Turn it up, man.
As I traveled alone,
all right, you can lower it down while I talk now. You see, why I'm playing this is because the persons I help, although they've been to herbalists, nutritionists, psychologists, clinical and otherwise, still end up in my program. A number of them end up in my program because of what Jimmy Cliff is saying to you. They eat, they change diet, but there's one thing that is not fixed. There's one thing that is not fixed, and we address it using drama, and it is the mind.
A lot of people won't understand it, but trust me, when you know you are weak and you're now able to stand up for yourself, you feel good. You feel good.
I started having a voice. Lives, and I started to understand things and accept it and learn to move on.
Instead of lashing out, you get to show love. It helps you understand other people, their behavior, why they be the way they do, and it also helps you to deal with them and cope with them.
Right. But trust me.
All right, so what we are dealing with now, and I'm going to run through that quickly. I can't give you all of the food. If you want more of this food, you would have to talk to me, call me, or send me a text or something, because I'm going to give you real food today in a quick way. Now, out of this, I've developed a program that helps persons to cope. And you heard the voices saying it. You learn to cope, notwithstanding all the diet that you've been on, notwithstanding all the food. But I do collaborate with herbalists, a lot of herbalists, and people who understand the value of the herbs. That's why I'm glad. I don't know who did this magic to place me in this big talk. That person must have done the research. I want to meet that person to give them a hug or something like that. But the value is that I focus so much on the mind that when we cope, we can be able to change and transform things. So I've developed a program that the Caribbean people have heard about, but it has to be like the best kept secret because they're asking me to give it to them. But when you give it away, you know what happens? Who's going to protect it? But of course, you're getting some of it right now. So out of that, I've developed a 3-stage or 3-phase program. If you look on the screen, you would see that speaks to acknowledging, accepting, and acting. And I mean going around and act all over the place. But I discovered that all of the clients who come to me out of all of this consultation with psychologists, therapists, and so on, herbalists, they had one problem, that they couldn't solve their emotional trauma and the stress that they've been going through. So a number of them have been said, well, time for you to go to mental hospital, madhouse. So they've decided to send them to madhouse because all what they try, the tablets, the pills, the herbs, it's not working. So then I said to them, you have to work on the mind. And that's where the drama kicks in. You feed them right, you put them on the right diet, but what are you doing with the mind? And so my focus is, in order for you to reach to that mental peace, if you look at the screen, you will see that it says mental peace. I had to come up with something that says mental peace out of everybody was asking for mental peace. I want a peace of mind. I can rest, I can sleep, and I deal with people who have acting or reacting to certain things, and then they find themselves in a high level of inertness. They can't do anything because they collapse. So they sit, they lie down in a bed in the room, they're eating, they're drinking, and they're blowing up or they're blowing down. Any way you want to put it, only to realize that the mind is the serious, serious place of connection that was ignored. And that is why I developed the program to give you this. You notice there's depression there. So no matter what stage or level you are at, you can find yourself walking around, and they say like zombies, in a place where you're wondering what to do next. Maybe I should eat that today, boy. Maybe I should change my diet. Or not realizing that you are not dealing with the emotional aspect of that being. So awesome diet, yes. And then you move on to realize that I had to create some phases. And that's out of authentic research. I've tested it. This is not an imaginary thing. Actual action research that was conducted with clients. And this is what we end up with. At the acknowledge phase, you realize that you have to start identifying. So I want you to start identifying the problem you're having right now, or the challenge, the big challenges that you're facing. Don't tell nobody yet, but talk to yourself. And then you will have to go to the next step or the level that says recognize. Some people don't want to identify, they don't even want to recognize. Watch what will happen next. And then you have to reflect. I hope you're reflecting, because when you find the problem, you start to think about it, you reflect, and you move on. And then you have to express. You have to start voicing what you feel, what is bothering you. Not change your diet, change the food. Man, let me go and get some KFC instead. No, that's what you eat. Let me get some oil long instead. That's what you eat. Oh, let me get some stew. No, that's what you want. Give me some kalaluna, man. That's, oh. When you do this and you start to voice, voicing doesn't mean that I have to tell each and every person. And most of my clients have said to me, the fact that I started voicing, the same psychologist, therapist turn and use it back on me and share it with other persons. You don't share your food like that. You eat your food. But they want that cleansing. And so they go back into another stage, a phase where they realize they go back into silence. And it sends them straight into depression. So you shut down. After you do all of this, you go right back down. And then I've looked at phase 2, which is a big challenge, where you have to validate. You have to do what next? This is your test right now. You say to yourself, you don't have to scream it out. When you validate, you are getting that opportunity to locate. And then when you locate, you start to, yes, man, you start to, And then when you start to focus, you would eventually have to start, you got to treat it. You don't put it on the shelf, as some of the therapists tell them, oh, Lord, I hope they're not listening. Anybody here not listening. They say, put it on the shelf, take it to the Lord in prayer. Go to church Sunday and your problem would be over. And this is no joke. I get the rejects, the clients that people say, that's it. The herbalists say, that's enough, I can't help anymore. And that's the kind of people I help. So I'm doing like what Daddy did, making the thing fall out into somewhere else. And then I encourage them to speak out. And when you speak out, speaking out takes you to a level of acceptance. You get to accept. And then, if you don't do that, that's not the end. You may eventually have to go right back. But I've created another phase that would help you when you start going to acknowledge and accept. You can now move on to the act. Notice I didn't put action there. I put act. You mean you have to do something. And what that phase says, you must do what first? I didn't hear that. Yeah, man, you have to question yourself. You have to ask things. Not beat up yourself, not judgment. Ask things. And then when you move, you start to edit now. Anybody into videography, photography, script writing, you have to edit. That means you're throwing out things that don't look good for you. That's what we do with the plate of food, and the nutritionist will tell you that. Don't eat that. That's not good for you. That's what we're doing. All right? And then you manage. And in managing, that means balance things. Balance. Urgent, important, critical. I got to get rid of some of these things. And you assess it. What value does that bring to me? Yeah, you don't want to do it. Well, I love. And most times I'm dealing with people who in love-hate relationships, right? And tackle it. When I say tackle it, you must come with that plan that say, no matter what, I'm going forward, it must happen. I'm dealing with it. I'm putting an end to this today. And then when you start to monitor it means what? Sit down and cry. Assessing and looking at how the thing working for you. How is that helping me now that I've taken a step of action? and evaluate. So that goes around in circle. You have to keep evaluating. Is that really working for me? Have I made the right choice? Should I go back? No. You stop. You reflect. If it ain't working for you, you have to go right back to phase 1. And that is how I do it with my clients. What happens? Yes, some of them cost me. I get, could I say we live on TV? Some of them cost me. I get some good words that sound like, I hate you, I can't deal with you, and this and that. And in the end, I get the most hugs and love. If you see hug and kisses, I get. And I deal with people of all ages. All ages. 60s. Yes, there are people in their 60s who've lived a life of happiness or illusion and eventually realize that all the things they've been taking, it didn't work. When we go through this, you realize in 1 day, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, and sometime in 1 night, the problem gone because of the process that we go through. Now, if it doesn't happen, you have to start all over. Now, this is a plan I've developed. I'm going to pass you it quickly. If you want more information, I say you can contact me because I'm here to have a discussion and dialogue. But I show you, out of authentic research, this is what we've done. Put them through pain and suffering and real pressure to realize that it's not really the diet, you know. It's not only the diet. It's the mind. You have to work on the mind. And if you don't work on the mind, you're going to still hungry. You're going to be changing diet over and over and over and over and over and again. And so when you deal with the issue, it's either you acknowledge, you accept, and you act, and you come up with a plan. And I use drama as a means of exploration. So when you start exploring things and you start discovering things, they start saying, no, I don't do that. That could never be me. And if in a husband, boyfriend, girlfriend situation, well, I love him, you know. And he's really getting fat because I'm eating the wrong kind of food. And you think, but when you dig deep and you realize it's really not the food, it wasn't the food, it's the emotional challenges that cause the person to be in this situation of inertness. Yeah? We've tested this. Look on the screen, man. You could see what's going on. We've tested this to challenge these issues. Anybody could read it. You know, I don't have glasses, so I can't read too well. You see? You see what's on the screen? We've challenged suicide ideation. We've challenged depression. And we've challenged what? Which is a critical element in the Caribbean. Low self-esteem. A whole heap of children, plenty adults who go through this process. And all they're doing is changing that, changing doctor, going to different herbalists and so on. And they realize that that is really not the problem. And when the doctor tells them, you should go and try drama, some of them rejoice. Because the doctor was honest enough to say, well, your problem has to be something else. We can't fix it. And they started the program. Magic happened overnight. So we take them from suicide ideation to that high level down to look at it, 10% or less. And self-esteem is the biggest challenge. But here is it. I'm going to leave this with you. After you do all of this, they go back to a family of pain and suffering. So they still cook the nice food for them. They still cook the whatever meal for them. But they go back to an emotional pain and suffering. And that is what is reflected on the screen there with a few 13% and so on that you're seeing. So we realize that we have to just help families, help not just the person, but get the family also to realize that don't just feed them, but emotionally you have to support them. And that's where the challenge is. Whatever clogs your mind, clogs your body, clogs the emotional energy, clogs your physicality, how you move, the energy that you carry to the workplace. And we've been doing a lot of workshops with persons to transform the energy of the workers in the workplace. So don't just feed them, oh, lunch is on the bus. Not just lunch is on the bus, but they come depressed, stressed, traumatized, with issues from over 18 years, 20 years, 40 years. And you think it's just the food, but that has added to some of it. So I leave these points there with you so that you can see. If you want more of mental peace, then we can have that conversation, a bigger conversation, where you realize that mental peace was designed to take you out of emotional stress while balancing whatever you eat. Now, internally, what we've combined it is looking at your strengths and weaknesses so that you understand. If I do this, I'm addicted to this, it could affect me negatively. Right? So this is the takeaway from mental peace. Ask me the questions. I'm here to answer. Amen.
Thank you. So we just learned about acknowledge, accept, act, depression, and all about the magic of drama. Yeah, so they will have another opportunity to, interact and speak. about it. So he's impressing on us the importance of mental peace. And that is very important when we're looking at healing arts. It's not only about the bush tea, but a whole holistic approach to health and wellness. Yeah? So now we're moving on to panelist 5, Tracy Asen. Title of presentation, Indigenous Medicine, A Journey of Indigenous Storytelling, Remembering and Discovering the Technology and Medicine which were already in use by our ancestors. Ms. Tracy is a member of Trinidad Indigenous Community. She's a writer, editor, filmmaker, and communications strategist. She produced a film, The Amerindians, the first film about indigenous survival in the English-speaking Caribbean, written, produced, and directed by a member of the community. Her published essay, Unaccounted For, is about indigenous survival in Trinidad. Was the only nonfiction essay included in the Commonwealth Writers Anthology, So Many Islands. Working mainly in nonfiction, she has been at work developing a series of stories about indigenous folklore and forest spirits. Her great-grandmother was one of the founders of the Santa Rosa, now First People community, based in Arima, Trinidad, and her great-aunt served as the queen of that community until her death. Ms. Asen has a passion for magazine and Zen culture and has been involved in the development of several publications. Go right ahead, Ms. Tracy Asen.
Thank you for that introduction. Mabreka, we are one. We are thankful for our mother, the earth, for she gives us all that we need for life. We have a responsibility to live in balance and harmony with each other and with all creation. To our mother, we send greetings and thanks. When the world was young and endless, we knew nothing, content to witness the wonder of the universe unfolding as we are learning. When the world was young, we flowed over the land like water, spoke the language of birds, sought the kinship of rocks, and traveled to and through the stars with the ease of breathing. Every hunter traveled with seeds we could never take without giving. Soil is living. Many of our islands have enjoyed unbroken occupation by indigenous peoples. We were not defeated, we assimilated. Although we have suffered many losses, there are many of us who stay true to our way of life. Fractured and traumatized by colonialism, we have survived and depend heavily on another type of AI, ancestral intelligence. An indigenous hunter always takes seeds to the forest, an act of reciprocity that reminds us of the fact that we are all connected. I believe we were much closer to nature than we remember. Cocoa, which arrived to us in the Caribbean from the South American mainland before the arrival of the Europeans, was and is still grown in forests. It is a sensitive plant, requiring a significant amount of shade and just the right amount of water. So mountain immortelle trees were grown alongside them. When the colonizer arrived, he saw an impenetrable forest. To the indigenous, the forest was a source of food, medicine, and shelter. When we look at bush medicine, or the practice of using herbs for medicine or plants, we must always first consider our intention. Our intention toward the plant, our intention towards the persons that we're trying to heal. Therefore, we engage with a conversation with the plant. So what's happening now, which is the act of commercialization, growing these plants, mass producing these medicines, in fact, actually represents a break in our relationship with that plant. The medicine that is then harvested through those practices to us is not the same as when we practice the actual spiritual connection and conversation with the plant. We must consider the fact that every plant is important. If not for us to use as food or medicine, it is for the use of other species, because Mother has provided food and medicine for us for free. It's growing all around us. We're busy replacing wild plants with lawns without even understanding what exists in a 4x4 square in our own backyards. Commodification has played a huge role in the disruption of our relationship with nature. We are continually using a hierarchical lens, which places us as the most important being on the planet. And even more dangerously, some humans are more important than others. Increasingly, the Caribbean has been a site of unethical, extractive practices by academics and institutions from more developed countries who routinely visit these islands for parasitic research on First Peoples and their medicinal practices, not making their work or reports available to us after their studies. In the indigenous community in Arima, DNA studies were actually conducted in the early 90s, long before people in the community even understood the value of the data that they were handing over. And now, there are other institutions initiating plant studies, unwilling to give communities a fair share of the funding received to extract that wisdom, unwilling to disclose their partners. Who is this information being shared with and to what end? Unwilling to share researcher credits for community members who are actually the subjects and objects of research. We are asking our governments and our own universities for support and protection for indigenous communities subject to these interrogations, and support and protection of our spiritual and indigenous knowledge, so that we can all enjoy these natural wonders freely for a long time. So I didn't come to tell you about the vervine and about the chandelier bush, okay? Recently, someone contacted my family and they were like, you know, I live in the bush and I know you all know how to make this snake medicine, and I was wondering if somebody could just teach me so that I could make my own. And then if somebody calls me, I can also make it for them. And I took it to my community. We thought about it. And I wrote back to them and I said, I'm sorry, I do not know anybody who is willing to teach you this medicine. And I thank you. That's it.
That's it. Wonderful, wonderful. The indigenous community in Arima in Trinidad. Yeah, Miss Tracy. And we heard about the importance of protecting, you know, and about this whole exploitation of knowledge and information, you know, for the big dollars. But it is very important for us to maintain and see the value and benefits in our traditional and indigenous communities and practices. And now I would go on to our final speaker of the day, Mr. James Toussaint. His Presentation is entitled The History of Our First People in Chibi, Trinidad and Tobago, Preserving Our Culture, Protecting the Intellectual Property and Rights of First People. And Mr. James Toussaint is a partner for First People Development, the competent authority for First People issues in Trinidad and Tobago. Their work is very extensive, assisting the indigenous group with issues as it affects their rights and privileges, as well as intellectual property rights. Mr. Toussaint's background is in broadcasting and law. He is focused on working with NGOs to improve the quality of life for the residents and burgesses of Arima, Trinidad. Their mission is to educate the public on the incorrect history as has been told by the colonizers and ensure that the future of the people of indigenous heritage gains the recognition and credit for their contribution to humanity. Ladies and gentlemen, Mr. Toussaint.
Thank you for that very kind and warm introduction. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. So the name First People, we're taking credit for it, was coined by the Partners for First People Partnership Development, and it was coined by the president of our organization, Mr. Raja Belix. The name First People refers to all the native people that were living in our land long before Christopher Columbus claimed to have discovered our motherland, which we know as Chibi, which is now called Trinidad and Tobago by the colonizers. Before Christopher Columbus set sail and landed in the New World, our people toiled and lived on the lands within our territories as evidenced by a very strong culture and systems that still exist today. We lived in peace and harmony among all the indigenous groups. We traveled freely in the Americas, which will have included North America, South America, Central America, and the islands of the Caribbean, which is originally called Cayos Yala. Our people built sailing vessels, and we sailed and we traveled the territories meeting other indigenous groups. We exchanged gifts and we shared stories of our common bond. In the island of Trinidad, which have been settled very early by the indigenous groups of Venezuela, as Trinidad, understandably, just a few short miles away, these groups are still very much alive and active in Trinidad and Tobago, and not decimated, as the stories have been incorrectly told. For instance, the Shagwanis, the Arukans, the Waros, the Caripachanians, Napoyo, Locano, and the Californians, which are names of, some of the names of the tongues that I've just called, exist today throughout our island, and that's where many of our indigenous people will now reside. Just to name a few places. Of course, Arima is, as you heard my good friend just stated, is the home of the Santa Rosa people as well, and the community is well and very much alive. The borough of Shagwanas, village of Caripachima, and the village of Aruka, just to name a few. The culture and the traditions are very much alive, celebrated in the communities where these groups reside. Sidras in the south, to Cora, to Lopino, to Maracas, the Blanchishares, and Brasso Seco village. In the north, and Arima and Aruka in the east. Very, very active indigenous groups. It has been discovered that many people will have indigenous blood and may not be aware of such. However, the spiritual and cultural traditions would have been passed along in the bloodline of the groups, and the culture and language would have been practiced, albeit subconsciously throughout time. The Partners for First People Development, PFFPD, is the UN-recognized competent authority for First People issues in Trinidad and Tobago. Our work continues unabated educating the public about our culture and intellectual property rights. So many of the indigenous medicinal plants and so that we spoke about, our group through our partners throughout the region would have been working on preserving and protecting the intellectual property rights for indigenous people. Every year we recognize October the 14th as Hayarima Day, and we gather together to remember our great warrior, Hayarima, whose monument stands proudly outside the Arima Velodrome, as we are reminded of our hero and the battles that has been fought and won against the Spanish colonizers. First People culture has been adopted in many cultures, and at times has been perceived as another culture when the tradition would have been taken out of First People culture and assimilated, just to show the interrelated and the links between all the cultures and how we learn and how we gain from each other. But a lot of that came from First People culture handed down the line. For example, potatoes, which we can only be found in this part of the world, is now called Irish potatoes. Pastels, which is today known as a Spanish traditional dish, came from First People. There's a Spanish tomato festival, which is in fact indigenous to us. So our culture will therefore be naturally preserved by the bloodline of our ancestors. However, the real challenge is in educating the masses as to our traditions and culture. We continue to partner with groups throughout the CARICOM region to bring awareness to our First People issues and cultures. I thank you very much.
Thank you. Intellectual property rights. We heard about the First People culture, the pastel, and the different types of food, and and to show that these indigenous groups are still alive and well, and continuing the cultural traditions. And now at this time, we will ask each panelist to do a 2-minute kind of wrap-up vibes, and then we can open for question and answer to the audience. Yeah, or okay, we go to questions and answer, and then they will do the wrapping up. So the audience now have their time to shoot questions, do some reflection, make any suggestion, or share their experiences. Can someone give her a mic, please?
Research along the way, I understand that breadfruit was made to feed slaves. Have any of you heard of, yes, that breadfruit was made to feed slaves?
If it's okay, I can take that question. At the end of somewhere actually around 1760, there rose a resistance towards the slave trade, not slavery, big difference. And so those who had a lot of money invested needed to consider, okay, all right, if they end the slave trade, but we're going to continue with slavery, then we need to make sure that we keep them alive. So there was an investment in this advertising of humanitarian efforts, because part of the fight to end the slave trade was demonstrating just how horrible slavery was. Part of that desire was not just the physical violence, the assaults, the rapes, all of this, but also the fact that they weren't being kept alive with food. So people decided to go to the Polynesian islands and bring back the breadfruit with Captain Blythe. because of the fact that it would, one, as has been said, it produces an extremely amount, a large number of fruit. It is quite filling, but it also will resist general hurricanes and tropical depressions and storms like that. So the breadfruit didn't actually get here until 1793. And then it spread around the Caribbean islands, but it was brought specifically as slave cuisine, as slave food.
Is it? Can I just add to that a little bit?
Please.
Yes. And also, I just want to say, like, this is my first time meeting James. I don't know that he really speaks for my community, but I respect whoever you spoke for, yes.
It's a family thing, don't worry about it.
So on the breadfruit, you know, it's interesting, but I traveled to the Pacific, Samoa, and Fiji around 2017, and the Pacific people that I spoke to were quite amused by the story, right? Because they have legends of them traveling across the Americas and through these islands long before the colonizers.
Oh, I believe that.
Right. No, so they actually, they say that they would have brought those things with them as well. So the idea that we have of the arrival of the breadfruit is tied to a particular telling.
Okay.
Do you know what I mean? But for the indigenous people in the Pacific, they are like, what are you talking about? We were there and we brought those foods with us too. And you can well imagine the length of the journey that they would have had to take. They would have brought food with them as well. So, you know, it also is a reminder to us of where we are getting our stories in terms of, you know, who is telling the story is the one who has the power. And this is why it is very important for indigenous people to reclaim their storytelling as well.
So, but is it so breadfruit in your opinion? Then I mean, we got diabetes.
Could you put it to your mouth?
We got a lot of diabetes and sicknesses, diseases here, but the breadfruit is how you start, right?
It's not like potatoes, where it goes through your system very quickly and then becomes sugar. It's a very slow. It's a slow food that breaks down at a rate that doesn't shoot your blood sugar up and down very quickly. So,
can I say something? There's always this talk about, well, there's a lot of diabetes in the Caribbean and there's a lot of that and it must be the food. It's not the food, it's how much we eat, right? We're still eating a high starch portion diet. Our plate still looks heavy on the starch side and then low on the protein side. And that format was specifically designed for people who were gonna go into sugarcane fields and cut cane, right? And we need a shift from that. And that's why there's diabetes and all this stuff, because we're very sedentary in our lives. We now have desk jobs, we're not going out there, we're not cutting cane every day, and we need to change what our plate looks like. So it's not the food per se. Right now, they're talking about breadfruit as a superfood and like all the nutrients that are available to it. But if you eat that superfood in a large quantity every time, then yes, it is going to affect your body and your health and what that looks like. But if you eat it along with other things in a portion that works for your body and for your health, then it's going to affect you differently.
Right. And just to add to that, we're having similar situations with that in Africa. I mean, we also are very heavily starch, and we're also heavily agrarian, but have become sedentary for many reasons. And our diets have not shifted and adapted. And we are, you know, in Ghana specifically, we're not eating enough vegetables. We're also having a lot of sugary drinks. You know, like we have a middle class diet, but we have agricultural, you know, diets. So like you can't do both at the same time, right?
Thank you.
Good afternoon. Do I need to stand? Well, I just wanted to comment on ask a question to do with the Building Caribbean Wellness. Anybody who has been on like a fitness journey, every fitness journey that I've been on, they kind of recommend, the types of fruit they recommend tend to be fruit that you have to import, like strawberries and raspberries and blueberries. And the local fruit are never really recommended, like the guavas and the soursop. They're never part of the diet that's recommended. So I just wanted to know if any of you know of any kind of holistic studies being done on the local fruit that they can recommend. Because I'm sure that we have options that will be just as nutritionally dense, just as, I don't know, low in sugar, I guess, that we could have as options instead of the fruit that's being imported. Does anybody know of any studies like that we can promote our local fruit?
I think a number of us on the panel have mentioned how these superfoods are also tied to commodification and economic gain for those that don't quite look like us. So in terms of, I think if you wait 5, 4, 3, 2, 1, you're going to see something that we've all been eating all our lives that's going to all of a sudden be the superfood, which then gets translated to now it's going to cost $20 to get a smoothie when it's been growing in our gardens, in our yards for dozens of years, if not centuries. There's too often it has to do with the exploitation and the commodification for economic gain by big companies, as well as what everyone has been saying about the pharmaceutical companies, because I totally bought into why is my mother always going into the garden and getting this and getting that, using banana leaves and soaking it in water to drink for her hypertension, not understanding that, the majority of high blood pressure medication is about potassium, not understanding that. I think that has, I think part of it is just trusting in what our ancestors have been doing for a long time.
Oh yes, no, I wanted to reinforce the point because I you know, like the title of my talk is actually Back to the Future, you know, because like the West Indian cherry, our own peppers, like that stuff really has like the highest concentrations of vitamin C. Yeah. But do you all remember when avocados were demonized? Do you all remember when they told us it was full of bad fats?
Coconuts.
And coconuts and coconut oil. Do you all remember that? Yeah. Coconut oil was so bad for you. Do you remember brown rice was for dogs? You all remember that? Okay.
I wanted to say that if we wait for a study to tell us what Caribbean foods we can eat, it's going to cost us 3 times as much to buy the Caribbean food.
That's right.
So just ask your granny, you know, what can I put on my plate for XYZ? And roll with that. Because by the time their science catches up with what she already knows, it's going to be in this superfood trend and cost us more than we want to spend for it.
I was literally going to say the same thing. Is when we talk about all the centenarians that we have, we know, like, we need to just talk to them. You know, my grandmother, my mother's sister, one of my aunties is, you know, in her 90s. The question is what has she been eating? And we need to kind of go back to a lot of that. And in Ghana, we have something called Sankofa, which I've been hearing over and over in the Caribbean as well. So it comes from a concept that is part of the Adinkra symbols. And these are major symbols which I believe a lot of us kind of understand in our cultures, which means go back and get it. So I would say, you know, what have our ancestors been eating for a while? I don't know. I'm not a nutritionist, but personally I eat a lot of papaya, or pawpaw. It's got a lot of great, you know, properties for other things. I don't know specifically about glycemic index or anything like that, but it's one of the ones that I gravitate towards. But I think that just so that everybody understands, everyone talks about the Mediterranean diet, right? Mediterranean diet was a marketing campaign. the Mediterranean countries decided, how are we going to move our products? And they were like, how do we move olive oil? So all the countries came together. They brought nutritionists, scientists, whatever, from Harvard and wherever, and said, study this, help us figure it out. So the question is where are our centenarians? What have they been eating? What have they been drinking? How have they been moving? And we need to continue to follow those paths. And I think we need to spend time to document it for ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we need to figure out how to bring that knowledge together. If one of us is better able to do the scientific research, fine, then let's have one university within ourselves doing it. Because I get frustrated in Ghana as well, because scientists are coming from different universities that are pulling this together, but we're not able to say it. There's the blue zone. We have our own blue zones, and how are we understanding them, and how are we putting this into practice? Like I said, there's one institute in Ghana that's pulling together some of this information. They don't have the market spend to be publicizing everything, but those who know go there and get the tablets of like the little sachets of the powdered versions of these plants and are able to consume them and take them. But we need to put that into general practice for ourselves. There's one thing I wanted to share actually with you. There was a chef in Australia who decided to do research on indigenous knowledge, but he was actually from the UK, and what he understood was that was not his information. And so he created and paid for a database that was locked. So no indigenous person could get access to that information unless they decided that. So how it worked was they documented everything. Nobody had access to it. The communities had to now say, there's enough of this, and we're willing to either sell it or decide how to share it with the rest of the world. They also have laws which makes it illegal for non-community members to harvest these plants. And so there is a structure, whether it's UNESCO heritage dishes, whether it's geographical identification, where we can now say it needs to be item that comes from this country, therefore like champagne and kashaka, all those things are protected. What are we doing in that space? And for us to know that this needs to be only belonging to certain communities and not, monetized unless they so choose that this is something that works.
Yes. Thanks for sharing that.
I just wanted to say that, sorry, before you move, I just wanted to speak to the diet. You see, research is funded. This may sound kind of crazy. Right? And if you're going for research that is funded, it's obvious you have to write based on what the reviewers and the peer reviewers request of you. Being in the field, I know. So be careful with what you read and what you consume mentally, because they will, as you said, they will shape you into what they want you to be. But for someone like me who grew up on breadfruit, fig, I don't know if you all know what fig, coconut, breadfruit, fig, and coconut all the time. And if you guess my age now, I look young, but I ain't young. All right? My grandfather, who died at 99, 100, just before 100, ate the same thing until they started stopping them from consuming these things. You see? But I know breadfruit, fig, papa, I say papa here, and a key element, guava. Man, we fed on guava like every day. And the great herbalist, if you look up someone called Patrick Dells in Grenada, would tell you that you eat what is in season. My mother told me that, my father told me that, my grandfather told me that. But we are being fed things out of season, out of our country, out of our islands. And that is where the problem. And then you are forced to create what? A health plan. How foolishness is that? That shouldn't be happening. But I'll say to you out of my work is that activity under pressure burns all the elements that are stored in your body. So you have to keep active, don't just consume. You have to keep active to get rid of the waste, because all that was created was patterned after the human energy and body. I pause.
My turn. Hi, good afternoon. Thanks for the panel. I wanted to ask regarding even the inclusion of non-edible plants in the planning of landscapes, because Ms. Singh said, soil is life, right? And I find here in Barbados, like, we will clear away a whole set of plants that actually could contribute to better soil life. Like here, people hate Miramosi because it's a pioneering plant and it takes over landscapes, but is a nitrogen fixer, right? And I'm not saying don't clear it, but you know, they tend to do it at mass. So that 20 years of Miramosi growing had 20 years of nutrition. Now that gets flooded out. So that is the context to ask my question is, when there's planning and land policy being put in place, have you all been approached around, you know, like how to manage that or to be included? Because the indigenous knowledge on how the land moves and shifts is not just the food. You know, you treat the soil well, you're going to get better nutrition. And, you know, like, I know we talk a lot about food and all of this stuff, but then I see some decisions being made across the Caribbean to be like, what's the value of that land? Let me extract all the economic value, but then we lose the nutritional value or the protective value. So I contextualized it a bit more, but the question is, where are you included in those discussions around land use? And what are your thoughts on like the non-edible plants being included in research and how they contribute to better nutrition as well?
Oh, well, you know, in many Caribbean, indigenous people are still invisible for many Caribbean governments. As you know, there's no box to tick on a census form that allows you to identify as indigenous, almost throughout the Caribbean. And thank you for raising that point about landscape, right? Because the truth is that the colonizers also reshaped our landscapes. You know, Barbados didn't always look like this, you know? Like, you know, trees and plants were cleared away to make room for cane fields. And so the landscape, as you understand it now, for Barbados, is really different from how it would have been before those ships landed. You know, that's why I made the point of the fact that, you know, we are voluntarily now, as Caribbean people, killing out plants in the yard to plant lawn grass, you know, unaware of whether or not the plant we've just killed can actually even cure cancer or some other, you know, debilitating disease. So I think too that there should be more conversation. You know, one of the things that I've been observing that has been gaining ground is the belief in the value of vetiver. Again, something we don't consume, yes, but very important. Always seen as an innocuous grass that needs to be getting rid of, right? But vetiver grows 10 feet in the ground and is the best thing to hold the land. You know, those roots are knitting together underground and holding the land. The grass itself is controlling the flow of water, and the amount of money that you need to spend to purchase vetiver plants is a tiny percentage of what you'll end up paying for your retaining wall, right? But, you know, Caribbean governments are you know, there are these multi-million-dollar projects when a road falls down involving steel and concrete and stones being shipped, you know, debilitating another area of the land because we're mining in order to produce those materials, but never thinking to plant a few rows of vetiver.
I would also add the obvious, destructive, real-time observations of climate change, especially in the Caribbean with the larger, more fierce hurricanes that are happening. Mangroves
Absolutely.
Mangroves protected islands from these large swells that have, in many cases, been gutted out to make more beachfront for tourists. And now, right, and then having to replace that sand every year when it wasn't supposed to be that. Those mangroves were there to protect, naturally protect inland. So it's not even just a question of what are we doing about our gardens and our yards, but also the entire island is being, we're decimating the potential survival of the people, of the natural landscape, of the flora and fauna, because we are not paying attention to what was supposed to be there. As you say, I mean, Barbados was a wooded island, gone for sugarcane, fell specifically for that. Am I part of that conversation? I am not part of the conversation, but I'm paying attention. I think for those who are not invited, when you should be at the table, we are paying attention and trying to find ways to raise these voices.
Can we take a couple more? Just a few
one more. In relation to, I think we just identified one of our biggest problems. This young lady stood and she asked one simple question. What are some of the recommendations that we can have in replacement of what the big countries are putting on us? And that was never answered. And I think I think you will, but I'm saying that doesn't, I'm saying in general, that seems to be one of our problems, because we know what the big corporations are doing. We have all of that knowledge, we understand that. But we are missing the point that there has been a big erosion in terms of the knowledge from our grandparents. You know it, I know it. You on the panel may know it. But there has been a gap, but we have to acknowledge and understand there has been a big gap in terms of what those under us know. They really don't. They don't have the knowledge. We are banking on the fact that they should have it, but we are missing the point that they don't. What are we doing to ensure that they have it? A question asked by a young person should be readily be available to be answered by saying, well, instead of strawberry, let's use this. Instead of cherries, let's use that. So this is where I think we're missing the connect, because they're asking. It's not that they don't want to know, they're asking. But we are banking on the fact that they should know because our grandparents did it. So I think we need to understand that that gap needs to be filled, and filled sustainably as well.
Yeah, I don't think our intention was to not answer the question.
No, it's not.
Yeah.
But I'm saying in general, we find a lot of that, and let's not ignore it, because this is adding to our problem. It's not as a panel, but I'm saying in general, we get a lot of that.
Yeah.
We cannot ignore that, because this is going to be part of the problem.
I agree. I think that the solution or starting place should be to get government interest in funding to do those studies and comparative and collect that information and have that available within our societies so that we can use it, right? Or to start doing it amongst ourselves and sharing it. And it's hard work and it's a lot of work, but we can't rely on some international study to then come in and tell us what food to replace in what way. We have to invest in it and do it. And that's where the gap is, right? With getting those investments done, like saying that the Mediterranean diet was a whole campaign, right? How do we get that same investment into the things that we're doing for our own benefit, not just for the tourists, not just to highlight something, but so that our community can thrive from the food that we have?
I would just add,
just because of the topic being on these foods and what we can replace and so on, I just want the panel to know that there is some work being done. The Caribbean Food and Nutrition Institute has done this work. Okay. And if you can't find it, in fact, to the lady there, avocado, pomegranate, cherries, all of these things are listed, and there's suggestions on what they can be replaced with, right? If you have a Mediterranean diet or foreign fruits and forest fruits and so on, that you can, there are suggestions of what you can replace those things with. Are there? No, that's not necessary. But my question, I'm going to pass over this lady because I know I jump in the line just to address that, right? But the question that I have, and it's further to what Martin had mentioned. I mean, we are here in the Botanical Gardens, which is a prime example of a deforestation, right? I went to school right across, we could not see that road or anything cross there, from where we are over there or from there over here. It was Mayamasi, it was Cersei, it was all of these types of naturally occurring vegetation cover. My question is, have we established or studied the loss, the biodiversity loss that, at least let's use this botanical garden as an example. We have to go no further, because I know some of you might not be from Barbados, but just look around, right? All of this that you see was forest. From Dar Road, right across there, from Dar Road up there, straight across to the other side of the highway. All of it was cleared. And for what? Majority is grass. So let me understand this. Let me explain what it is that the grass is good for, what it is we have replaced the grass with, or replaced with the grass, and do this assessment to understand where it is we're going. I do a lot of work with the Beekeeping Association. This used to be a good spot for beekeeping. It's not a good spot for beekeeping anymore, because bees can't survive on the 5, 10 trees that we see around here relative to the forest cover that was here. Right? So the question, I'm not sure if the University of West Indies is doing any of the research. I'm not sure if some of the indigenous communities in your own country doing the research about the biodiversity loss and the value of the loss, and how it is we could, when we talk about repair, reparations, and so on, what it is we put in place to ensure that we take stock so that we don't just do this thing en masse, and we actually have a true value of what it is when we try to determine where we're going as far as development is concerned.
Yeah, one more question. Time running.
I think that anecdotally, people say that climate change began with colonization. And I think that you know, there are probably some studies around it, but I don't know that there's anything specific to the region that actually exists. And certainly, I think our university should be engaged in that work.
Okay, first of all, thank you for a really excellent panel. I just like how everyone just came together. Just to share some information, so I'm a Trinidadian American. Hey, Trinidad. But also with roots in Barbados and St. Vincent. Really happy to be here. But I've lived on the African continent now for the last 29 years, in particular in Mozambique and now in South Africa. Sharing information, a few things. We have what's called in South Africa the hungry obese, right? It's a technical term. And the hungry obese refers to, and mainly a lot of black people because of apartheid, people whose diet, it's filled with empty carbs. So they're big, but there's no nutritional value. And that's also the manifest. Absolutely. So we have the hungry obese, so sharing information on that. So we talked about a few things. I'm going to try to be very quick. You talked about the Mediterranean diet, which was a PR campaign, but so is the whole issue around the 10,000 steps. I'm sure we're aware of that. It was a machine that they were pushing at a particular point in time. But what I do want to say, and Salassie, this is important for you and others also, and Tracy, I enjoyed all of your conversations. I think that what we need to look at is how do you share information as knowledge centers? In South Africa, where I live, 5 of the major universities have indigenous knowledge centers where these questions are being researched and the information is being shared. So if we're talking about South-to-South cooperation, I think that's an excellent point, because you said there's an indigenous knowledge center in Ghana. Well, many of you know South Africa is one of the powerhouses on the African continent. So I think it'll be a great thing in terms of that sharing. So UE here, Cave Hill, UE in Trinidad, wherever, how do you connect? I'm going to put one of my friends and colleagues on the spot. We have here at the university, from the University of the Witwatersrand, or WITS, Dr. Brett Piper. Brett, please stand up. You all know that I do that. So I think it'll be a great connection. Have that conversation now before you leave. So you say, well, Brett, how do you introduce me to the IKS, the Indigenous Knowledge Centers in South Africa, of which there are 5? So while we're here, let's make those connections in addition to looking beautiful, everyone, but in terms of sharing the information that further enlarges and supports our people. So big up to the Caribbean. I'm happy to be home.
Thank you, thank you, thank you. And time is running. This was a wonderful interactive discussion. And I just want to thank the panelists for giving their varying views, and submissions we spoke of food, we talk about herbs, we talk about, indigenous people, and the importance of maintaining, and transferring our traditional knowledge. And the question is, what is being done, what studies are being done, but sometimes it starts from right on our kitchen counter. It starts from when we put that pot on the stove, man, that kettle, where you put it in there, quick mix, Ovaltine, Milo, or are we really focusing? So we help to build and prop up the commercialization and the commodification of culture. And it is the onus is on each and every one of us to change the status quo. And the youths, I'm happy to see this young lady in the audience, taking it well, my dear. And bring the youths out, man, to some of these discussions. Because the youth says, so is the continuum. And I love the energy. I love the vibes. CARIFEST 15 being held in Barbados in August 2025 will be an unforgettable moment. And I just want to thank each and every one. And what is my takeaway? We learn of mental peace. We learn of the sea moss and the cassava and all that Guyanese kind of food. We learn something from Ghana. We know about the cocoa and different things. So I remember the Vincies would do the cocoa, grind it and roll it. And you make some good cocoa tea with some flour drops and things. Yeah, we come up with some real traditional food, but no, they ask so much youths. Yeah, they was doing the bush tea tasting, and they asked you want some? No. It is not a sweet drink. It don't have enough sugar. Yet the health people say the sugar and the salt is a danger to us, right? But we still hook on these kind of tastes. Salty snacks, sugary drinks, and it damaging our bodies. That's why sometimes we ask ourselves, why are the Caribbean countries plagued with so much issues of communicable and non-communicable diseases? And the doctors will say, put more vegetables on the plate. Put more greens on the plate. And we skin up your face. I want none of that. But the Chifet line is long. KFC line is long. And then we talk about saturated fats. We talk about cholesterol, the high blood pressure. And don't forget stress. A lot of us live under stress. Stress to get money. Stress to get, and that's what my brother Dr. Williams talking about mental health. Because there's be a lot, what we call it, anxiety, and we moving proud and firm and dressed down and thing, but within our minds we are worried, we are bothered, we are worried about our financial situation, we are worried about our children, we are worried about the future, and what does that hold? So I just want to give thanks for everything that was said, and I just come away with a couple recommendations, which is a recognition of the contribution of value for indigenous cultural heritage, a reflection on plants as living archives that heal our bodies, carry our histories, and connect our communities, to encourage further training and pharmacological exploration, and that's what we was talking about. Whether it's through the university, whether we get funding from here, there, or wherever that can be, to document some of our experience and some of our history. But nothing can beat pulling out your little notebook. We got a phone though, drop it in the notes. Where's the tea? If you ask somebody, during COVID-19 was a typical example of how Caribbean people resisted, man, and showed resilience. We ain't taking that vaccine. I ain't care if I lose my job. I ain't care if I travel. I ain't care if I am not taking it. And some concoctions come out the larder and the cupboard. Huh? People from America, Canada, all over calling down in the Caribbean. Where's the remedy? The bay leaf, the garlic, the ginger, the turmeric. It's on the broadleaf thyme, the sage. Don't forget the pepper. And we managed to bear through. We lost some, but not for we come through it. We survivors. So we encouraging the further training and pharmacological exploration to preserve, practice, and embrace our ancestral knowledge and the tradition of not only bush tea, but healthy lifestyle. Breathe. We hear about keep moving, being active. You know, we sit down all day with we eyes down in the phone, and sometimes when you get her outside so glary you can't even see. So we would call it the white light, the bright light damaging our eyes. Because we ain't moving, we ain't exercising no more, we ain't playing village cricket and lay village wrap up ball, kind of cricket and them kind of things, you know. What we call it? Start sticky in the army. You pelt the ball and you dodge ball and thing. Yeah, so bless up on yourself. And I give thanks, I give praises that we were able to meet today to do another big conversation at CARIFEST 15. One love, one heart, one destiny. We in Barbados, yeah? So experience all you can, Grand Market. A lot of activities still happening for CARIFEST. So enjoy the sea even, the sun, and the lovely people. Yeah, give thanks, give thanks, give thanks, give thanks.
I can help you protect our citizens.
Jamaica Eye will play a part in increasing your public safety.
Jamaica Eye is part of an island-wide network of camera surveillance systems designed to increase the safety of you, our citizens. If you have a camera system outside your home or office facing a public space, log on to jamaicai.gov.jm today. Jamaica Eye, we're all connected. The Ministry of National Security, creating a safer and prosperous Jamaica.
Hi everyone, let's talk granting aid. Eligible targeted loan applicants may receive a non-repayable granting aid of $60,000. These funds can be used for school-related expenses such as traveling, buying food, housing, or purchasing a laptop, for example. Eligibility is determined by the financial circumstances of applicants and the availability of grants. Apply early at slbja.com and be one of 4,200 beneficiaries of our granting aid.